and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On today's show, we're going to discuss a topic that often gets overlooked when we talked about intimacy and the lifestyle and kink. The difference between sexual satisfaction and sexual fulfillment. Now, at a first glance, these two things might sound like they're the same thing, but in reality, they're really two very distinct experiences. And understanding that distinction can open up really new ways to connect not only with ourselves, but our partners. Now, before I get into it, I really want to take a moment again to thank all of my new followers for your continued support and your thoughtful questions that you've been sending my way. I do appreciate it. Shows are going to get slotted for all of these things you'd like me to talk about. I'm on it for you, I promise. It really is inspiring for me to see how much engagement the community is starting to give in as far as getting something back that they want to hear and how I can do these shows that are tailor-made for them. So I really do appreciate every comment that you're doing, every message, everything that you're sharing. And, if you'd like to support my show, support the work that I do for the community, there is a donation link available on my Spotify profile. Every contribution does go a long way to kind of helping me keep these conversations going, keep bringing you these topics. Now, when we talk about sexual satisfaction here, we're usually referring to something that's functional, right? Physical release. That kind of comes from that moment of pleasure or tension that's being resolved. But sexual fulfillment, on the other hand, is something a little bit deeper. It's our emotional connection, that intimacy, that sense of vulnerability we allow ourselves to feel when we're truly present in the moment with somebody else. Or, even with ourselves. Now, in the lifestyle, where we rely on trust and respect and connection, and we understand how these play these central roles in what we do, understanding how these two ideas differ really is essential. It's not just about the scenes or the play, it's really about how we engage with each other and what we walk away feeling after those experiences. Now, whether it's the rush of the sensation, the vulnerability, the power exchange, the intimacy and the closeness and the vulnerability of aftercare, these dynamics have the potential to be incredibly fulfilling. But only if we allow a space for that depth to grow. So today, we're really going to unpack a lot of this, what these ideas mean, why they're important, and how we can bring more awareness to the way you navigate both satisfaction and fulfillment in your own journey inside of the lifestyle. Now, first, I want to really look at hedonic sex versus the fulfillment. Now, when I start by looking at what do I mean when I say or what I talk about hedonic sex, for many people, this is where our sexual experiences feel purely functional, right? Now, whether it's through masturbation or partnered activities, the goal simply is release the tension, experience the moment of pleasure, and then, move on. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it's exactly what we need. But here's the catch. When sex is reduced to just a physical act, it sometimes, leaves us a little bit feeling empty. And you might have that moment of satisfaction, but it's fleeting. And afterward, there's that lingering sense that something is truly missing. Now, inside of the lifestyle, this idea is purely functional sex can show up too, right? We can negotiate it into our contracts if we want or our relationship, but it's often wrapped in more complexity. If you think about how scenes can sometimes focus on the physical, whether it's the intensity of the play or the rhythm of the impact or even the psychological release of the exchange itself, these moments can be thrilling, yes, but the focus stays only on the act itself, and it can start to feel transactional sometimes, almost like you're just checking things off a list. Scene's done, release achieved, but was it actually fulfilling? And this is where the psychological element comes in. One of the reasons we sometimes feel that emptiness is that sex, or really any form of intimacy, isn't just about what's happening physically. Sure, our bodies are involved, but our minds and our emotions are truly, that we need to truly shape the experiences aren't there. And if you think about it, have you ever been in a situation where, on paper, everything should feel 100%? Maybe the scene went exactly as planned, the sensations hit right, but afterwards there's this nagging feeling that something's missing. That's because intimacy doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not just about the touch, the scent, or the tension or the release. It's about how these pieces connect to your inner world, your emotions, and your sense of safety. That whole feeling of being seen and understood. And when those emotional and mental pieces aren't in sync, especially with the physical, it's like you're only experiencing part of the picture. And you might feel, satisfied in the moment, but are you truly fulfilled? That fulfillment comes when all of these elements, emotional, mental, and physical, are all working together. And as human beings, we're wired for that connection on multiple levels. We crave the feeling of being fully present with someone, of knowing that they're present with us too. And when that's missing, it's no surprise we feel unfulfilled. Even if the scene or sexual act itself has checked all that physical boxes, it doesn't mean that we're hitting the emotional or the mental ones. And in the lifestyle, this whole blend of physical and emotional connection really is especially significant for us. BDSM is, at best, built on trust and communication and respect and vulnerability. These aren't just buzzwords that I constantly say or that others say as well. They're really the foundation of what makes our kink dynamic so powerful and transformative. But let's really be honest here. It doesn't, always play out the way we want it to. Sometimes we focus on the physical sensations, the rush of the flogger landing just right, or that thrill of the perfectly executed power exchange with the rules and the responses and how it makes us feel, right? But that emotional layer then gets left behind, and that's not always a great conscious choice. It's easy to get swept up in the adrenaline of the scene or the novelty of trying something new. But when we stay in that surface level space, something deeper gets lost. Now, over time, this does lead to a subtle or even not so subtle disconnect. And it's not just from your partner, but from yourself. And you might start to notice, things like, are you just going through the motions, right? Or is everything even right in the scene? It's just, I'm present, but I'm on autopilot. Maybe you just realize that after the play session, that instead of feeling closer, there's more distance that lingers. It's not because the kink itself is flawed. It's because the balance between physical satisfaction and the emotional connection has tipped too far in one direction. So how do we bridge that gap? It starts with being intentional. This means approaching play with a lot of awareness. That BDSM isn't just about physical sensations. It's about what those sensations represent to us and how they resonate with us emotionally. Look at sensation play or impact play for an example. On the surface, these might seem like purely physical acts. You're running a feather along someone's skin or smacking someone with a flogger or a paddle. It's all about the body, right? Well, no, it's not. When you approach these acts with presence, they become so much more. It's not just about the sensation itself. It's about what that sensation makes your partner feel. Are they feeling cared for? Do they feel seen? Do we make them feel vulnerable in a way that feels safe and empowering and erotic and sexual? That's where the real depth comes in. And it's not just about your partner, it's about you as well. How do these actions connect to your own emotions? Are you staying present? Are you aware of the energy you're creating together? Or are you caught up simply in the, executing the scene and ticking all the boxes? There's two kinds of questions that can shift play from functional to fulfilling. When you're intentional, even the simplest act, a touch, a look, a word can carry the emotional weight and create a sense of connection that lasts long after that scene ends. The key here is to remember that the physical and emotional don't have to exist in separate spaces or vacuums. They can and should work together. But to achieve that, it takes mindfulness and willingness to engage with not just what's happening in the moment, but how it's affecting both you and your partner on a deeper level. And if you approach the lifestyle with this kind of awareness, you create this whole opportunity to be satisfied, but not just satisfied, to be and find fulfillment. And here's the key in this. We know that in the lifestyle that the physical and emotional don't have to be separate. They can and should work together. They create experience that resonate on multiple levels. But to make that happen, we have to be mindful of our approach. Are we showing up for just for the release? Are we chasing the physical? Or are we allowing ourselves to slow down to really connect? And not just with our partner, but with ourselves. Do we understand what we want and need? And that's the question we need to keep in mind. Because sometimes the connection doesn't always come naturally, even in a dynamic that's built on years of trust. Sometimes we, feel tempted to focus on technical execution of this scene. Getting the timing right, using tools perfectly, or staying in a particular headspace. And while all that stuff matters, it doesn't replace the emotional energy we bring to the moment. Connection is about being present, not just physically, but emotionally, and it's about being attuned to your partner's needs. God, their reactions, their energy, their whelps, their moans. And, while also being honest with yourself about what you're feeling and how and what you're bringing to the table. I promise you, when you make that shift, when you approach the lifestyle with intention of integrating the physical and the emotional, it transforms the experience. A flogger isn't just a tool for sensation. It's a way to communicate trust. A whispered word isn't just a command. It's a moment of vulnerability shared. When we stay mindful of these layers, we create a space for fulfillment that goes far beyond that physical release. And that's really where the magic of this lifestyle truly begins to live. And I know I talk about emotions a lot. I know, obviously I bring that into the show or I write about it, but these are the things that I think a lot of times get overlooked. Why does the emotional depth, or why emotional depth matters so much in this lifestyle? It's a game changer, ladies and gentlemen. It's a game changer. At its core, the lifestyle isn't just about the physical stuff or the thrill of that power exchange. It's about connection. We create a shared experience that resonates on a deeper level between two people. And when there's real emotional engagement, scenes become more than just play. They become moments of profound meaning, where trust is built, vulnerabilities are shared, desires explored, and intimacy reaches a level that's hard to find anywhere else. And let me tell you, when I connect emotionally, all of a sudden the things you thought weren't possible become possible or desired, and you want to explore limits with somebody that you never previously thought before. And that's what it's about. Think of it like this. A flogging scene can be more about the rhythm, the sound, and the sting. But when the emotional depth is added, it becomes a conversation. The way the top reads the bottom's body language, the way the bottom surrenders that trust, right? All of those things. That's where the meaning lives. It's not just about the act itself. It's about what's being communicated in the space between two people. Every strike, every sound, every whimper, every pause becomes a part of an unspoken dialogue. And when both of partners are fully present, my God, that dialogue is transformative. And trust and respect and that communication and that vulnerability, all of these little things that we need for connection, right? Without them, the scene might just feel hollow or transactional, even if there's, everything goes perfectly and it's executed well. Trust says, I see you and I respect your boundaries, and it creates this whole foundation where both of us are safe enough to keep going and pushing our limits. Communication says to us that, I want to understand you and I want to make this shared experience, ensures that both of you stay aligned in the intentions and the responses. Vulnerability tells us, I'm willing to be open and let you in, even if it's scary. I trust you. And in particular here with vulnerability, it's where the real magic happens. It's what allows our walls to come down, and it creates a space for real intimacy and growth. And when you bring that emotional depth into the scene, it has the power to shift your entire dynamic. And I promise you, what might otherwise feel like performance or a set of actions becomes an intimate exchange that lingers long after the scene is over. It's this emotional resonance that makes the lifestyle so much more than a connection of the physical acts. It's a space where you can truly connect, not just with your partner, but yourself. But there is risk, right? That risk of disconnection. And here's the reality of that. All of this emotional depth doesn't always come easily, and there's plenty of reasons why someone might prioritize their physical or psychological release over their emotional engagement. For some people, it might be about convenience. It's easier to, stay focused on the physical act and to dive into the complexities of feelings and connections. And for other people, it might be a way to just protect themselves, to avoid the risk that comes with, opening up. Opening up is not easy. And let's not forget the influence of societal conditioning. Many of us have been taught to separate sex from emotion, to view physical pleasure as nothing more, entire than it's just the act itself. So enjoy it. It's not intimate. And if you add trauma into the mix, it's no wonder that emotional connection can feel out of reach, especially for trauma victims. Trauma here really creates these barriers that make vulnerability feel dangerous or even impossible. And when you've been hurt before, the idea of opening yourself up again can feel like a risk, especially if you're not ready to take it. But here's the thing about that. If you address those barriers, whether it's shame or guilt or fear, that becomes this whole key to unlocking this whole deeper level of our own fulfillment. And guilt and shame in particular can really weigh us down. They make us feel like we don't deserve this emotional connection, that somehow it's out of reach. And yet, by confronting all of these feelings, by working through them, we begin to embrace the full spectrum of intimacy. It's not always easy, but my God, the rewards are worth it. And you open and unlock these doors to fulfillment. And when you do, you can start moving past some of these things. It allows us a way to engage in the lifestyle. And once we do, that really shifts. It becomes less about achieving a specific outcome like this, the physical release, the perfectly, crafted and well done scene. It's more about that journey along the way. And it becomes about our presence with our partner and ourselves, about recognizing the layers of all of that connection that exists beneath the surface level that we truly need. And sometimes it starts with the small steps. Maybe it's, as simple as conversation before the scene, where you talk about not just all the physical boundaries, but the emotional ones. Or maybe it's about making time for aftercare if that's your thing and you negotiate it in. And that can focus somehow on not just the recovery, but the connection. And these moments, small as they might be, where this is where all of this emotional depth begins to take root, where when we prioritize our emotional connection, this lifestyle becomes so much more than an outlet for release. It really does. It becomes a space where we can truly grow both as individuals and in our relationships. And that's what makes it so powerful. So how do we find some of these deeper, more fulfilling practices? Well, I have a couple of things I want to discuss here. First, I want to talk about mindfulness and presence. Now, I never used to give mindfulness a lot of due credit, right? Over the years, over this decade, I've really paid attention for it. So I want to start with mindfulness and presence first, because these two practices here can significantly deepen your experience inside, not just with the lifestyle, but life itself. Staying present during a scene might sound simple, but it's one of the more powerful ways to build that emotional connection. And when you're truly in the moment here, you're not just going through the motions or focusing on what comes next. You're actively engaging with all the sensations. You're feeling the energy in the room, the tension rising, that crescendo before, everything's done. And these emotions that are unfolding between you and your partner, you actually get to experience them. And if you can think about how easy it is to get distracted, even in those intimate moments, maybe your mind starts to wander Whether you're doing something right or you're replaying, some stressful conversation from earlier in the day, when that happens, you're not fully engaged with your partner or the dynamic that you're creating together. So you need to be present. And presence keeps us grounded in the here and the now, and it allows us to notice the little things. Maybe our partners started breathing differently, or the way that their bodies were responding to something, or the emotions that are on the surface during the level. So how do you really cultivate mindfulness during play? This starts with yourself. Take a moment before the scene starts and focus on your breathing and a mental check-in with your partner and yourself. How am I feeling? What energy am I bringing to this space? How are they feeling? How can I meet them where they're at emotionally today? And during the scene, you can stay emotionally tuned in. And, and that might just involve things like asking, how does that feel? Which we should be doing. Or, this is going great. I'm right here with you. Physical touch can also anchor both of you in the moment. Placing, a steady hand on your partner's shoulder or eye contact can speak volumes without needing words. And afterward, you take the time to reflect what felt good, what emotions came up. But these small but intentional practices really do bridge the gap between the physical and the emotional. Now, unfortunately, there is guilt and shame, and we need to talk about that. And this sometimes blocks our fulfillment. These emotions stem from sometimes society or our families or even our friends, especially when we're starting to talk about intimacy and sexuality. We're told that sex should feel or look a certain way, or that some desires, especially those within our lifestyle, are wrong or too much. Over time, those messages really can sink in, and it creates this whole mental barrier between us and the deeper connections that we really want. And shame makes vulnerability feel dangerous, and guilt can lead us to second-guessing all of our desires, even if they're consensual and safe. And this often shows up in the form of self-judgment. You might catch yourself thinking, do I really want this? Or what does this say about me that I enjoy this kind of dynamic? These aren't just passing doubts. They really can keep us active from embracing the whole spectrum of what we want and how we engage with our side of fulfillment. But there is good news here. These feelings don't have to define your experience. If you can address the guilt and shame, and you really take the time to give yourself that permission to feel desire without judgment, that means recognizing that your needs and interests are valid, even if they don't align with what everybody else wants, right? Because you're not living your life for everybody else. It also means reframing the way you view vulnerability. It's not a weakness, but a strength. And that allows you to connect more deeply with yourself and consequently your partner. And if you're struggling with all this, start small. Journal about what you enjoy and why it matters to you, right? All of that can be helpful first step. If you feel safer doing so, have a conversation with your trusted partner, right? Or maybe a friend. Hearing somebody else validate your experiences really can go a long way, especially if we're going to dismantle how shame kind of surrounds us. And over time, these smaller interactions help you shift from the mindset of guilt to one of acceptance. And that makes it easier to fully embrace the deeper emotional connections that this lifestyle can offer. And when we bring mindfulness into what we're doing and work through our feelings of guilt and shame, we really do start to create a truly emotional and sexually fulfilling time within the lifestyle. Now, all of these things take time, right? But they're worth the effort, because when we show up fully present and without judgment, the connections we create become deeper and more meaningful. They're impactful, they're richer, they're more vibrant. All of these things are quite important. But how do we handle our evolving desires inside of the lifestyle, especially growth over time? Well, that's an important one. But One of the most fascinating aspects here of the lifestyle is how desires evolve over time. And for many people, their early experiences in kink tend to be more focused on the physical satisfaction. They explore the sensations, they try out the dynamics, they're leaning into the thrill of it all. But honestly, that's natural. But when you're just starting out, there's so much excitement around discovering what your body and your mind respond to that we're kind of just focused on the physical, but we neglect the other part. But as we grow, just not in our kink practice, but our emotional maturity, those desires often shift. And what once felt safe and satisfying on a purely physical level may no longer be enough. And instead, many people begin to crave this deeper emotional and mental connection with their partners. They start to see the lifestyle as more than just an outlet for sensation or release. It becomes a way to express vulnerability, trust, intimacy, and respect. And this evolution isn't a sign that you're leaving something behind. It's a natural progression. And the more you learn about yourself and your needs and your boundaries, you may find that what fulfills you changes. And that's okay. Maybe a practice that once felt super physical to you, like role play or power exchanges, now really resonates on a deeper level because of the emotional trust you've built up with somebody. Perhaps you find yourself drawn to the dynamics that emphasize connection over technique, where the focus is less on doing it right and more on what feels meaningful in the moment. But you have to navigate practices for fulfillment. You have to work at it. But how do you navigate all of these shifts to deeper fulfillment inside of our lifestyle or just life itself? It starts by recognizing that not all lifestyle dynamics are created equal when it comes to our emotional depth. And for example, certain dynamics here, like DS, tend to emphasize trust and communication and vulnerability because inside of these dynamics, the connection between two people here is often just as important, if not more so, than the physical actions involved. And DS at its core is about the exchange of power. Of course it is, but it's also about mutual respect and that emotional safety that comes with knowing that someone truly sees and values you. And role play can foster all of that. There's some emotional depth there, but it does depend on how it's approached and if it's done with intention. It can allow partners to explore different aspects of their identity. They experiment with vulnerability, communicate in new ways. On the other hand, though, it can remain a surface level experience and that just focuses solely on the scene without diving into anything else. Then there are other practices that may lean, more heavily in toward the physical, like sensation or impact or heavy sadism, needles, suspension. These can be incredibly satisfying on their own, but if the emotional element's missing, they might not lead to the same level of fulfillment. That's not to say these practices can't be meaningful. They absolutely can, but finding the balance is key, and you have to ask yourself, what do I want to feel during this experience? What do I want my partner to feel? And the answers to those questions can help guide you towards a practice that aligns with your evolving desires. The beauty of the BDSM lifestyle that we're all a part of, or should be, is that it's incredibly flexible. You don't need to have to choose between physical and emotional satisfaction or connection. You can have both. The key is to approach your desires with curiosity and openness and allow space for them to change as you do. When you give yourself permission to explore, it's not just what feels good, but what resonates emotionally, and that's when you create a more fulfilling and deeply connected experience. And isn't that what we're all about? I want to leave you all with something to reflect on. This lifestyle, it's easy to focus on the physical, the sensations, the play, the release, but how often do you pause to think about the emotional connections that you're creating? Ask yourself, am I prioritizing the physical over the emotional connection in my experiences because I don't want to get close? And if so, what small steps are you doing or can you do to bring more balance and intention and fulfillment? So I want to talk about some upcoming shows. First, I'd like to hear what you all have to say. We're going to keep this conversation going on social media, where you can comment here on the Spotify channel or on YouTube, or you can comment on Apple or even on Fetlife. You can do all of these different places. Keep the conversation going. I want to hear more about your experiences and, how fulfillment over satisfaction has kind of played a role in maybe throughout your life, or you're coming from one aspect and tuning to, or changing towards the other. I want to hear. On some upcoming shows, I'm going to be doing some more interviews. I have one on the ABDL community with somebody from the Netherlands. I'm going to be talking to someone from the leather community over the next couple of months. All of these are coming up. I'm going to have some returning guests like Honeybee. Hopefully the dynamic duo of Raven and Stormy will be back. We will see. I have a couple of other ones I'm working on. We have some really great shows. I want to talk to, again, there was somebody in the Middle East I want to sit down with, because you know what? We're all connected. BDSM in the States or North America or just Europe, that's not the world of BDSM. Sorry. It's not. I want you all to understand, when I say things like that, I say them because when I do things, I actually work through intention. And what do I mean by that? I say things so we can understand that our world isn't myopic. That, yeah, things happen in the U.S. and oh my God, but the U.S. isn't the center of the universe, and I'm American. Right? So I say things out of intention, and I say things with conviction. It's not because I'm looking at, have a fight. But if it upsets you, well, you might need to talk to someone about that. Probably not me, because I'm not going to be the person for you. However, so we got those coming up. I have some other things. We are going to I am going to be next week, without a doubt, I'm going to be talking about exploitation for profit in the lifestyle. I'm going to talk about individuals or organizations that put together things for you all, and they prey on your vulnerability and insecurities for money. And they tend to keep us separated. For all this talk about let's desegregate, and my favorite one, decolonize a bunch of crap, we are keeping everything more segregated and separate more than ever, and we're quantifying it in boxes. It's not about togetherness, that's about separation. So we're going to cover that one next week. That'll be a fun episode. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, let me know. I want to keep this discussion going. Please, if you do, follow me on Spotify. Don't forget to rate the show. Click the follow button at the bottom. If you follow me on through the app, click the 3 dots. Go over to the rate the show. Click me for 5 stars. This allows me to keep the show for free, lets others find me, keeps the show growing, allows other people to kind of hear what's being said, maybe at the time that they need to hear it. Until next time, everybody, be safe and stay kinky.